Hi, my name is Lee Shanis, and this is a brief overview of the Simplify Language training. The first quote is about simplifying language is not dumbing down language. Simplifying is about making your communication easier for more people to quickly understand. And we'll look at lots of examples where simplifying is not dumbing down, and you can easily see that. This is also not something that's easy to do. A lot of people leave training thinking, wow, like that was shockingly hard. A lot of the tips are simple, but to actually do it, to actually simplify my communication, our organization's communication, took a lot of practice and a lot of hard work. So that's something that a lot of people have learned. And a lot of people appreciate the permission to communicate simply. A lot of times we feel this need to sound overly academic and intelligent, and there's a place for that, but there's also a place for simplicity. And when more people understand you, you're inclusive. So communicating simply is really permission to be inclusive. So the agenda for this, I'm going to quickly explore training topics, talk about some slides we do, some discussions we have, some activities we do in the longer training, and how to schedule a training, how to talk with me to get more information, what trainings look like, how long they are, the cost, and all that, and when to simplify. There's a place for poetic language and academic language and intricate language, and there's a place for simple language. It's about knowing your audience and what they want. A lot of times we don't consider our audience as much as we should. So we'll talk about that in the training. We'll look at a lot of examples like this. This is a letter from a superintendent that went to an entire school district. This is a simplified version. We'll look at what do you notice that's different? How does it feel looking at the second one versus the first one and things like that? All the examples I use in training are anonymous, they're real, and they can come from your organization if you'd like. I scan your communication, your website, strategic plans, applications, presentations, whatever it is. I'll meet with you beforehand, talk about what kind of your communication do you want to practice with? Do you want to practice more with writing, speaking, presentations? And we'll work on that, which makes it real for a lot of people. We'll look at assessing grade level of writing and how that can be helpful or not helpful. We'll talk about the objectives. So this is about making your communication easier for people to quickly understand. There's three main audiences for this. The first is people who experience language barriers. So that's English learners from lots of different levels, beginning English learners, intermediate English learners, and the population I talk about more is advanced English learners, people who can communicate and express themselves fine in English, but they don't always receive information as easily. So that's a really important audience that we'll talk about. Literacy barriers, 54% of adults in the US read at a sixth grade level or below. Doesn't say anything about a person's intelligence or capability, but it does tell me if I give them language written at a 15th grade level or 20th grade level, they're probably not going to easily and quickly understand it. And this is for people who prefer clear and brief communication, which is everybody pretty much. So the audience for some of my trainings is we want to communicate better with our English learning employees. For others, it's we want to communicate better with policymakers or the founder of our foundation or people who appreciate and will only read clear, easy to understand information that they can, absorb quickly. I'll teach skills to reduce text by 20 to 50% without changing anything important and without dumbing down. So there's lots of little skills that can get you to 5%, 20%, 30%, 40%. Just a lot of little things add up. And we'll talk about how simplifying can impact all of these things. We really focus on trust, right? Because when people understand you, they trust you more. When they don't understand you, they trust you less. This impacts recruitment of staff members, recruitment of participants. A lot of times we exclude people unnecessarily and unknowingly with a complex job posting, right? Or tough interview questions that the interviewee doesn't understand. So we potentially lose great candidates. There's lots of data about how miscommunication impacts efficiency and productivity in the workplace. And a lot of miscommunication is easily avoidable. And a lot of times it starts with being clear. This is a huge piece of language access and language justice. We're seeing a lot more of this. Language access is awesome. A lot of times it only talks about translating and interpreting, but it's not translating and interpreting or simplifying communication. It's both. If you take a long, dense document in English and translate it, it's going to be long and dense in other languages, and people will probably not access it. So if you spend some time simplifying the English version first of whatever you're translating, it's going to make it easier for the translator. It's going to make better translation for the people receiving it in their home language. It's also going to save you time and money. And a lot of translators, they are put in a tough position because they're handed things that are hard to translate, and they have to translate it exactly how it is, because if the audience sees that it looks different, right? In English it's this word, but in Spanish it looks like they're saying it differently. They don't trust the translation. So again, simplifying the English makes it easier for the translator to not be in this tough position of I got to translate it exactly how it is, but it's not going to be an effective translation. This also impacts access for vision, hearing, neurodivergence, and lots of other issues of access. So you can't talk language access without also talking about simplifying language. Why do I focus on this? I've dedicated my whole life to cross-cultural connection. I co-founded the nonprofit Intercambio Uniting Communities in 2000 and was the director for 21 years. And Intercambio trains volunteers to teach English to adult immigrants. That's where I started to notice, some people are really good at this skill of simplifying, and there's a lot of impacts of it. And some people are not aware and they don't have the skills. So let's start talking about this. I also experienced this as a Spanish speaker, right? Some people who speak Spanish with me, I understand 100%. Some I understand 50% or 25%. So it goes in lots of directions. And I've heard from lots of people, just experiences they've had in the workplace where miscommunication erodes trust, it destroys confidence. I've talked to tons of parents who say, I don't read long emails from the principal or the teacher. I wish they were shorter. I would actually read them. So this is relevant to lots of different areas. It's a very common problem because very few people have gotten training on this and have talked about this with their teams. And what I love is the solution is fast. You can go to your website and simplify language today. It's not something that takes years. You can modify how you send emails, how you speak with people immediately. It takes practice to get great, but it's you can start doing it immediately. And I talk about language as a privilege, right? Being born into English is the language of dominance. That's a huge privilege. I also talk about how things like race and ethnicity and gender also play a role in this because as a white male, nobody judges me according to, how I look when they see me. Nobody thinks, I wonder if Lee's, educated. But I've had a lot of people in my training say, Lee, it's not as simple for me because as a person of color, as a woman, I need to enter spaces and sound a certain way to feel like I belong there, or else they'll make assumptions about me that I don't belong. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the complexities about that and the role of power and privilege. These are some of the organizations I've trained in the last year and a half or so, just to show you it's a broad range of school districts, local governments, universities, banks, food companies, nonprofits, foundations, branding companies, state agencies. This is for everybody. It's for anyone who communicates with people in any role, whether you're a communications director or you're working with custodians or whoever you are, this is relevant for your position. So we'll talk more about power and how a lot of language in society was created intentionally to exclude people, and how a lot of what we've been taught our whole lives is about impressing people with our language. So again, this is unlearning, and that's what makes this hard to do. We talk about why this is a problem, who speaks up when they don't understand, what people do when they don't understand. We receive a lot of communication. So, what do we do with long communication we receive? What do we do with short communication we receive? We'll have those conversations and how we want our audience to interpret our message the same. We don't want 10 people to have 10 different interpretations of what we write to them or what we say to them. So, unclear communication can be really problematic with that. We'll have small group discussions about your own communication style, how power privilege impact how you communicate. personal experiences you've had, and we'll dig into how can simplifying language impact your work, your role, your department, your colleagues, your customers or participants or parents, whoever you work with. And this requires, again, a lot of unlearning, which is why it's hard. It also requires humility, right? You need to recognize I'm not yet great at simplifying, and it's something I want to be great at. If you haven't practiced it for 10, 20 years, you're probably not great yet. And it's a key piece of access and inclusion and equity and all those things. It also requires discussion. The more you talk about this with your team or with other people, the more you recognize the impact. Don't just expect to read an article about plain language or read a list of tips and then, oh, I'm great at this. I don't need training. People really benefit from the conversations and diving deeper into these topics and practice with your own communication. It's easy to look at other organizations' communication and say, oh, yeah, they need to work on this. But when I bring organizations their communication, and show it to them and say, let's practice with this. A lot of times they're shocked. They're like, well, I can't believe we have this on our website. Now that you've pointed out the importance of avoiding jargon and long sentences and all these things, we have all those. And the good thing, again, is it's easy to work on it. It's about knowing your audience and their priorities. So, what do they want? Not what do you want? What does your audience need from you as far as your communication? We talk about that. And we talk about artificial intelligence. So, using ChatGPT as a tool to help you simplify. It can be amazing. It can be not great at times, but it's important to know that this tool exists. And I'll encourage you to experiment with it in different ways and share certain prompts that I use regularly to help me simplify stuff. I'll talk about this idea of the meal, the snack, and the bite that can help tremendously with things like newsletters, right? How can I give my audience a bite? Just the most important things they need to know in the 10 seconds they glance at it. And then if they want more, they can see the snack. If they want more, they see the meal. So these are some of the tips that I share that we look at examples of all of these. And again, a lot of these examples will be from your organization. So they're not theoretical, they're from your organization. Some are speaking, some are writing, some are for both. Some are more important for English learning audiences, but most are for all audiences. We'll do lots of practice individually, in groups. I'll do some longer practice where we dig deeper into communication that you want to practice with or that I've identified as communication that could use some work. And you'll practice using all those skills. Brevity is confidence, length is fear. I love that quote. And so the full training, what it is usually it can be any length, but I recommend 3 hours. That's a good amount of time to dig into the why and the how and to practice and have the conversations and look at the practice. I do trainings online and in person. They're all customized, it's engaging, it's fun, it's immediately actionable. These aren't theoretical things, these are things you start doing immediately. I'd prefer 20 to 25 people per training, but I do larger groups and can talk about that with you. I accommodate any budget. I have a typical cost, which I'll share, but I know some organizations have big training budgets, some don't. I used to run a nonprofit, so I understand. I want to work with everybody. And again, this is for everyone, every level, every position, every organization. I also provide editing services if you have some high needs for an outside perspective on some key communication. Like we're relaunching our website, we want you, Lee, to look and see if there's any language we could simplify before we launch it. I love doing that. I also offer training on facilitating and public speaking, how to make online and in-person gatherings, meetings, presentations engaging and effective and really get the audience involved in learning and giving them great questions to talk about and discuss and a lot of just little tips on how to navigate conversations. So that's it. I would love to talk to you more. You can set up a 15-minute time to talk with me, or you can go straight to this link, calendly.com, meet with Lee, set up a time. You can go to my website, sign up for the newsletter, just email me, any of those, but I'm happy to explore possibilities. I won't push it if it doesn't seem like the right fit for your organization, but it's really fun. I've gotten great feedback from every organization I've worked with so far. and I'm happy to talk more. So thanks so much for being interested in this topic.